So welcome to an introduction on briefs and other methods of keeping track of certain playing cards or a certain card in particular. So briefs, as described by Steve Forty, is, quote, a collective term that refers to any method for securing or identifying the position of desired cards. So we're going to be going over a lot of concept and we're going to revisit them in future videos. Well, some of them at least. We're not going to revisit everything. So this is more of an introductory video, so there's not really going to be any in-depth explanation, mostly. So this will serve as more of a good place for you to sort of just start and sort of delve into different methods and different sort of things, and then you could go ahead and look at further sources, which I'm going to note down the comments down below if possible. And yeah, so first off, we'll start off with some basic sleight of hand stuff, and then we'll slowly go into like the more like maybe you might need extra stuff, maybe not, and all of that stuff. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into some ways of keeping track of certain types of playing cards and all of that doohickey or whatever. So the first method that we're going to go over is the key card. The key card is something that beginners know of and also lay people know of as well. So this is pretty interesting because the key card is, I would say it's one card in particular that stands out, mainly because you either memorized it, so in case it's, for our case, it's going to be the Ace of Spades, or it's going to be a card in particular that stands out because of one defining trait in its back design, sort of like a one-way back design, let's just say, right? So for example, if I start with the selection on top, let's just say the Three of Spades. If I start with the selection on top and I don't know what it is, but I memorize the bottom card, which is the Ace of Spades, if I ask the spectator to cut the deck, right, if I just look through the deck, I would just need to look at the card below of my key card, and if I just cut straight to it, then the selection returns back to the top, despite the spectator cutting the deck. So that's just a very, very basic way of using the key card, right? I can actually do the same thing with the back design as well. So if the border of the cards is slightly offset, like with those bicycle cards, like the cheap bicycle cards that you find in Costco or whatever, then I can reverse one card and use that offset edge as a key card. You can also do the same thing with a one-way back design, like this deck of block playing cards. It's a bit exaggerated, but it's just for example purposes. So if all of them are the same direction and you have one card reversed, then you can tell that there is one card that stands out, and that is my key card. Okay, so you should obviously use more subtle back designs, but that is just an example of how you can get a key card and how key cards are actually useful, right? Just one card in particular that stands out that allows you to maybe undo a certain action, like you cut out the key card and then you could just replace the selection back on top of the deck, right? So that is just a simple way of using a key card, and generally what the key card is used for, right? Which is just keeping track of where the deck was cut or keeping track of where the selection is, okay? Another basic concept that is introduced to beginners is the concept of breaks. A break is basically just a separation in the deck that is held by your hand. So we already have an entire video dedicated to the different types of breaks, but it is slightly outdated, so I'll go over them here as well. So the first break that people learn of is actually the pinky break. The pinky break is just like a separation in the deck caused by the flesh of your pinky, of the pad of your pinky, usually on the bottom corner of the deck, like so. Okay, so you just have a slight bit of flesh over this separation over here. Your thumb and your middle finger apply a slight bit of pressure onto the deck to prevent it from popping up, because if I don't apply any pressure, there's a chance that you might see a separation over here. But if you apply more pressure with your middle finger and your thumb, then you shouldn't have this problem. The next break that we'll go over is the ring finger break. It's going to be the same thing as the pinky break, but it is done with the ring finger and is slightly closer to the center of the deck. So rather than being on the bottom corner of the deck, it is slightly closer to the center of the deck. Usually this break is used in conjunction with the pinky break to hold two breaks at once. So you have the pinky break lower down in the deck, and then you have the ring finger break higher up in the deck. So now you have two breaks to keep track of two different things. The next thing that we have is a thumb break, which is done from the back. So if you do this type of thumb break, it is done usually in a bill grip. So the deck is open at the back while it is square from the front, like so. So what you have is that the deck is held open by your thumb, like so, near the center or near the right corner or the left corner. It really doesn't matter. So the best angle for this move is either from the top or from the front, like so, because any other angle you'll see this huge separation in between the packets, like so. All right, so that is the thumb break done from a bill grip. The other thumb break that you can do is actually a thumb break but done from the front. So this is a thumb break that's meant to be done in a dealer's grip. So the deck is held open by from the long edge by the thumb, like so. Okay. So your middle ring and pinky finger are going to be curled around the deck to hold everything in place, and the fat of your thumb is just going to be laying on top of the deck to keep everything from popping up. Because if the fat of my thumb is removed, this tends to pop up as well. Okay, so I want the fat of my thumb to be over here. Okay, so usually you wouldn't want to actually do it from this regular angle, right? Because you would actually see the separation. So what Michael Vincent actually recommends for this type of thumb break is that you actually have a wrist kill. You actually have the deck sort of face down on face up on the table, like so, and you could just sort of talk as you hold the thumb break, right? Because it's from this angle, the spectator won't be able to see that you have a thumb break open. So generally you would do it from this angle and you could just talk and relax. Okay, so this is the optimal angle for this type of thumb break. Okay, the next break that we're going to go over is going to be the heel break, which is done with the fat of your thumb. So it is something that looks like this. Okay, so it is done with the fat of your thumb. So the separation is held by the flesh of the fat of your thumb, like so. Okay, so your other fingers, which is your thumb, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky finger, are going to be wrapped around the deck like so, and just a bit of flesh is just going to be on top of the deck, and this prevents the rest of the deck from popping up. Again, like every other break, okay? Because if I remove the fingers, this tends to pop up and it flashes, and you don't really want that. So I want my fingers to be on top like so. So the heel break generally is rarely done on its own. Usually it's meant to be a sort of transition move into a more comfortable break, like a pinky break, where you could just sort of pop this up and then you could go into an Altman trap type of deal, and then you could just transfer it into a pinky break, right? So that is the heel break, okay? Which is this move over here. Okay, it's also called the Greek break, but there's also something else called the Greek break. Oh God, so I'll just keep calling this one the heel break. The next break that we're going to go over is called the Erdnase break. So this is a break from a bill grip. So the break is going to be held open from the side, like so, and it's going to be held by your pinky, like so. Okay, so it's going to be held open by the pinky from the front of the deck, like so. Okay, your thumb should be closer to the bottom corner of the deck, and your middle and ring finger are just going to be in front of the deck to hide this separation along of the short edge. Usually what I do is that I tend to curl in my index finger on top of the deck to keep it consistent with the rest of my bill grips. But if you're afraid of this short edge flashing, you can actually just extend your index finger, so then it helps hide this break, okay? So what's good about this break is that I think it's just an improved version of the thumb break, right? So you have all the advantages of a thumb break. You have the exact same position, you have most of the same cover, but you also have an additional angle, a good angle, and that is from this side over here. So usually, if you remember the thumb break, this angle actually flashes. It flashes from the sides all the way over here, right? So it flashes from 3 sides, but the Erdnase break has this additional angle. So now you don't have to be afraid of flashing this side, so you can turn your body. Versus if you're doing a thumb break, you can't turn your body at all. You would have to angle it weirdly, like so. Okay, so the Erdnase break is a good move, like so. So it's done by the pinky from a bill grip, like so. Now let's go over the Vertnaise break, which is also done from a Bevel grip. So usually the Vertnaise break is done from a small number of cards because the cards above of the break will be clipped in between of the crotch of your pinky and your ring finger. So what you have is a couple of cards in a pinky clip, so you can do a Vertnaise break on 1 card, on 4 cards, probably like 10, but that's a bit risky. But if you want to do it above 1 card, then that's that. So you have 1 card clipped in a pinky clip, and then you would have everything in a Bevel grip, like so, okay? So what you have now is actually an upper corner, the upper corner bent upwards, like so, and the rest of this side is actually just propped up, like so, okay? But there's actually, this break is actually pretty good because it's actually good from most angles. It's good from the top. From the side-ish, you would have to, maybe not from this side, but if you angle it correctly, they shouldn't even notice that it's bent, right? From this angle in particular, you won't really see it. From the back, if you lower your hand like so, it's good. And from the side as well, because the back of your hand hides that as well. So generally, the Vertnaise break has very, very good angles, okay? You just don't want them to see too deeply into your palm, otherwise they'll see this curved card. But this is essentially an Vertnaise break, but done on top of the deck, and with a card clipped in your pinky. So you can always take this card away, right, into a pinky clip if you want to steal it or whatever. But generally this is the Vertnaise break, which is quite good. So yeah, I actually use this move quite a bit. So that is the Vertnaise break. Next we have the flesh break. So the flesh break is basically, it's gonna be quite odd because it is this, okay? So what you have is that it's going to be very similar to the pinky break or the ring finger break, but instead of the pad of your fingers just being inside of the break, you actually have the flesh of the phalanges of your fingers. So as you can see here, my middle finger, my ring finger, and my pinky finger all have just the slightest bit of flesh from their second or third phalange inside of the breaks, like so. So you have this, right, like so, and then you have your fingers are gonna have to be forcefully wrapped around of the deck just to prevent it from popping up. So you have this very weird claw grip, so you're gonna be forcefully wrapping it around, and it doesn't look the best, but it does have its own uses. So usually what I actually do to get into a flesh break is that I would have an Vertnaise break. I would forcefully jam my fingers against the side of the Vertnaise break, and then I would curl in my fingers, so then this portion just clamps down on some of the flesh of my fingers. So then I have a flesh break, like so, okay? Traditionally, how you get a flesh break is that you would have a packet sort of side jogged, and then what you would do is that you would actually just press these 2 packets together forcefully, and that would cause a bit of flesh to be trapped in between, right? So you would have to bend these 2 packets together, and that would cause a bit of flesh to be trapped in between, okay? So that's the traditional way of how to get a flesh break. Personally, I like going from an Vertnaise break to the flesh break, okay? So that is generally how you get into a flesh break. So the next break that we are going to go over is called the Greek break. As I mentioned before in the heel break section, there is another break called the Greek break. This is it. So the deck is going to be held open by the long edge, by the flesh of your palm just below of your fingers. So it's going to be over here, okay? So it's going to be a very, very weird break. Okay, so it's going to be sort of like the flesh break, except it's done with this part of the flesh, and your fingers are going to be wrapped around the deck, sort of like you're holding a hamburger, like so. So your pinky, ring, and middle finger and index finger are on top of the deck, and your thumb is just applying pressure on the bottom, and it's clamped down on the flesh of the skin below of your fingers, like so. Okay, and that is the Greek break. Another odd break is called the wedge break. So the deck is going to be held by the pad of your fingers away from your palm, okay? So it's going to be sort of away from my hands, right? And they're going to be held just by the fingertips, okay? But secretly, from the back, the majority of my pinky is going to be inserted into the deck, like so. And that is the wedge break, okay? So I'm just gonna have this really, really jank setup. So my thumb is actually clamping down on the front to prevent the back, to prevent the entire deck from popping up. So the thumb clamps down to prevent anything from popping up. And you can see that this break actually has pretty good angles. Surprisingly, despite having your entire finger stuck into this break, it maintains very, very good angles, right? You just have to be more conscious of this side. It basically has the same angles as a thumb break, okay? So yeah, that is the wedge break. You rarely actually see this one, but I do use it from time to time for a couple of moves in particular, which I'm not going to go over in this video, okay? And then the last break that I'm going to go over is called the Zorro break. So this is a combination of a heel break and a pinky break, which creates a 3-packet sort of combination. So we're gonna have our pinky break down in the deck, and upwards, and on top of the pinky break, we're gonna have a heel break, like so. So what you have is that you have this 3-packet display, which creates a Z, like so. So this is the Zorro or Z break. So it's just 2 breaks being held, okay? So it's sort of like the pinky break and the ring finger break, right? Except instead of the ring finger, you're using the heel break, like so. So this is just a very, very weird little setup, like so. Okay, and those are all the breaks that you can go ahead and study. So the next type of thing that I want to discuss is jogs. So jog is basically a singular offset playing card in a squared up deck, okay? So this basically acts as a bookmark for you to just find your way back to a certain thing or other devious things, okay? So the first jog that I want to go over is the angle jog. So this is essentially a card that is offset at an angle. I already went over this in the insertion jog tutorial, but this type of jog is going to be mainly used for transition between jogs, but it is occasionally used for different things, which I won't go over, but I mainly use it for transitions. So usually the angle jog will look like this. You would have the bottom corner sticking out, the top corner is going to be jutting out from the short edge of the deck, like so. And then usually like just a bit of the corners are going to be sticking out, like so. You also have like different angle jog variations, right? If you're going to a diagonal palm shift, right, you would have like a larger angle jog, right? So anytime that there's a card at an angle that's sticking out, that's an angle jog, I would say, right? So that is the angle jog. Next, we're going to go over the in jog. So that is a card that's protruding from the back of the deck towards you, the performer, like so. So it is like so, okay? Usually, the most basic type of thing that we do with an in jog is just either lifting it up on the in jog so they could cut to the in jog, or you would actually push down on the in jog and then you'll be able to cut the in jog to the top of the deck, okay? So that is how you usually use an in jog. Usually, right? There are many other ways to use all of these types of moves, okay? I'm just presenting the most basic way to use them. The other type of jog is called an in jog, an out jog, okay? Or an up jog. And the reason why it's called that is because it's sticking outwards of the deck, right? Very, very openly away from the performer, okay? So usually this type of jog isn't actually meant for anything devious, usually. So usually it's just meant to display a card. So if you actually have the audience member touch a card, right, you would out jog it, so then sticks out. So then the audience member knows which card is their card, which in this case is the 4 of clubs. So that is an out jog. Next, we'll have a side jog. So that is a card sticking out from the side, like so, okay? So it sticks out by the long edge of the deck versus the in jog, which is sticking out from the short edge of the deck, okay? So usually, this is hidden by a billow grip, like so. So usually you have your right hand over of the deck, which hides the in jog, okay? Unless you look too deeply into your hand, but otherwise, it's hidden by your hand in a billow grip. Usually this type of move is done for things, for magicians, is done for things like the ribbon spread hideout. But you can actually use it for a whole bunch of other things, right? But that is the side jog. And all of these jogs can actually be done from an angle jog, which is why I say the angle jog is a transitional type of jog, because from an angle jog I can go into an in jog, I can go into a side jog, right? So we can go ahead and learn more about the angle jog in the insertion jog video. Okay, now let's go over steps. A step is essentially a jog, but it is done with an entire packet of cards instead of one singular card. So again, an in jog is done with a single card, but a step is done with an entire packet offset. Okay, so instead of one card, it is one entire packet, like so. So you either have a packet of cards offset to either the side, forward, or backwards. Okay, it's pretty rare to actually see steps in the hands, right? You rarely see this type of mechanic being used in the hands. Usually what steps are going to be used for is actually at the card table, where you would have more cover for steps, right? Because you can see like this entire block is not exactly very hidden. So at the card table, you would have both hands holding the deck, and it can cover both the it can cage in the entire deck, so you wouldn't be able to spot steps. Okay, so this type of brief is usually meant for the card table, where you have this, right? But secretly you have a step, like so. So that is a step. Next we'll go over a bevel. So a bevel is basically a step, but instead of an entire packet being offset like so, it's actually a gradual smearing of cards. So instead of this entire block, the top of this packet over here will actually be smeared over, like so. Okay, so you're gonna have this gradual smearing of cards. So it'll look fine from the top, right? Because if you actually do a step, from the top, you're actually gonna see this little offset over here. But if you're using a bevel, right, you won't see any type of any offset in particular, because this top card is square with the bottom of the deck, like so. Okay, so Jeremy Griffith has a great introduction on bevels, so you can go ahead and look at that. I'll put the info card up there. But generally how you would actually get into a bevel is that when you're actually doing strip cuts, there's going to be naturally friction that occurs between packets. So when you do strip cuts, you might accidentally maybe just smear some cards, and then you might accidentally get a bevel, like so, which you can treat as a step. So you can cut to the bevel and other things, okay? So a bevel is essentially the same thing as a step use-wise, but it is a lot more subtle, let's just say, okay? Because it has a lot more function. It just looks better, okay? So that is a bevel versus a step, okay? The only difference is the smearing of the packet, okay, versus entire block. Next, let's go over crimps. So a crimp is basically just a bent card, which allows you to basically just bookmark a certain position because of, again, its bent properties. So then you could just pick up on a certain position relatively easily. So sometimes a crimp is removable. Other times it is not, because it might damage the card or whatever. So a crimp really depends on how much work you put into it, right? So what we refer to as work is just how much you bend the card, okay? So that is a crimp. So let's go over the different types of crimps. So the first one is a longitudinal crimp. So this is a card that is bent along of its long edge. So you would have something like this, right? So you just bend the short edges together, bend the long edges together, and then you would have a longitudinal crimp like so. So then if you cut the deck, you'll have this nice bend over here where you can just cut to the break once more. So this longitudinal crimp can either be upwards or it can be downwards. So if I cut the deck like so, then again you'll have that nice bend, and then I could just cut to the crimp once more, okay? if I can find it. There we go. So that is a crimp, a longitudinal crimp. The next type of crimp is a lateral crimp. So this one is a crimp that is bent along of its short edge, like so, right? So it either upwards or downwards, and it's going to be the exact same purpose as a longitudinal crimp. So you just cut it, and then you have a bend, and then you just cut straight to the crimp. Obviously, I'm exaggerating most of these crimps, but that's usually how you would actually do, use crimps, okay? The most common one, rather, is a corner crimp. So one of the corners of the card is either going to be bent upwards or downwards, depending on how you want to use it. So if I have it on top of the deck, I cut the deck, I can then lift up on this corner and then give the deck a cut, and now the crimp is back on top. If I have this lifted upwards, like so, and I place on the bottom of the deck, if I give it a cut, I can then lift up on this bent corner, and then everything is back in position. So that is a corner crimp, and is a lot less obvious than a longitudinal or lateral crimp, because a longitudinal or lateral crimp, you can see it from all sides, right? You can see the bend from all sides, right? Versus a corner crimp, you can only spot from one particular side, right? If I give the deck a cut, you can only spot this bent corner from my angle, okay? So that is a corner crimp, okay? Next, let's go over the breather crimp. So a breather crimp is basically an X shape that is put into the card, allowing to spin like a top, okay? So this is going to be a permanent crimp. So once it is in your card, you can't get rid of it. So to get this type of crimp, what you're going to do is that you're going to pinch the center of the card with both hands. So you're going to have the thumb on top. Your index and your middle finger are going to be on the bottom, like so. And what you're going to do is that you're just going to apply a bit of pressure. You're going to drag those fingers across into a diagonal, like so. And then you're going to repeat the process with the other corner, like so. And now what you have is a breather crimp. So now if I set it on top of the deck, you can tell that it spins like a top, right? So that is a breather crimp. So this is what we actually call a positive breather, all right? So this is a positive breather crimp. So the card is kicked downwards while it is face down. So you can tell that there is a slight bend downwards, like so. Okay, so that is a positive breather crimp. If we want to create a negative breather crimp, it's going to be the exact same way, right? You're just going to do it face up, and you're just going to apply this diagonal pressure once more, right? Oops, there we go. So now this card is going to be bent upwards while face down. So you have to turn the card face up for it to spin like a top, okay? And this is a negative breather, okay? So if you're using a positive breather, you would usually actually set this card on the bottom of the deck. So then you would cut the deck, and then your breather crimp, you would actually be able to pick it up, and then you'll be able to replace the breather back on the bottom, and then the deck stays the exact same, okay? The negative breather you actually place on top of the deck. So when you cut the deck, right, you would see the negative breather. You will be able to pick up from the negative breather. The negative breather returns to the top of the deck, okay? So that is the differences between both breather crimps, okay? Negative breather goes on top of the deck and it is bent upwards. Positive breather goes on the bottom of the deck and is bent downwards. Okay, so that is the breather crimps. And then here are two other weird crimps that most people don't really talk about. The first one is called the Mexican Joe crimp. This is a really weird one. So the upper corner over here is going to be bent upwards with your thumb. So you're just going to roll this corner upwards. This bottom corner over here from the diagonal is going to be bent downwards, okay? So what you have now is actually just a wavy card. So you just pinch these corners with your index and your thumb, and you're just gonna bend them like so, okay? So what you basically have is this nice wavy pattern. So this is basically just a double corner crimp, and so it's gonna function the exact same way as a corner crimp, right? You can basically just shuffle however you want, but what this allows you to do is that depending on if you want to cut above the crimp or below of the crimp, all you need to do is just rotate the deck. Okay, so it has all the, so it's less subtle than a corner crimp, but it does have more utilities depending on how you rotate the deck. All right, so if I go to the bent, so I have the side with the bent corner, I could just bent downwards, I could just lift up on it, which cuts the Mexican Joe crimp to the top. If I have the side with the corner bent upwards, I can just cut the corner, I can just cut the Mexican Joe crimp to the bottom of the deck, okay? So there are two ways to basically use a Mexican Joe crimp, okay? Basics wise. The next crimp that we're going to go over is going to be a snap crimp. So this is the last type of crimp that I'm going to go over. There are more crimps, but this is the snap crimp. So what you have is that you're going to bend the card downwards along of its short edges, like so. So then you have a lateral crimp, like so. Next, you're going to grip the center of the card with your middle finger and your thumb, like so, and you're going to push down with your index finger, causing this card to snap. So now what you have is this really weird bent card, and this is called a snap crimp because of the sound it makes. So you place this card on the bottom, you give it a cut, you get the exact same thing as other crimps, right? You can then just lift up on it, give it a cut, and your snap crimp returns to the bottom of the deck. And that is a snap crimp. So those are all the different types of crimps. You have the longitudinal crimp, the lateral crimp, the corner crimp, the positive crimp, the negative breather crimp, the Mexican Joe crimp, and then we have the snap crimp. Next, let's go over bridges. So a bridge is essentially a crimp, but applied to an entire packet of cards. So an entire packet of cards is bent in a certain direction. So if we're doing a longitudinal bridge, what we have is that the packet is bent along its long edge, and it's bent either upwards or downwards. So we're going to basically just forcefully bend this entire packet upwards, like so. So now you have a distinct separation between two packets, like so, okay? So that is a longitudinal bridge rather. So you either bend it upwards or downwards, doesn't matter, and then you have this nice separation in between the packets, like so, okay? So what this allows you to do is that if we're doing a box cut, like so, get a nice longitudinal crimp, right? And then you could just strip cut over the top, and then you could just retrace everything and just get everything back on top of the deck, okay? So that is how you actually use a bridge. You can also use a lateral bridge, which is just along of the short edges, like so. And it's going to be the exact same thing, okay, as a longitudinal crimp. It can either be bent upwards or downwards, so like this or like this. Doesn't really matter, same difference. You get the same gap over here, and then you could just cut to it, like so, okay? So that is a bridge, or you can do a corner bridge, which is the same thing as a corner crimp. You just bend the hell out of one corner in particular, and then you have a corner bridge, like so, okay? So a bridge is basically just a crimp, but done with an entire packet of cards. Next, let's go over nail nicks. A nail nick is just a slight bit of damage caused to a card by your nails. So this could be done while you're handling the card, right? Or just anything, right? So if your spectator just touches a card, right? Under the guise of just showing the card around, you can just apply a bit of pressure with your index finger and just sort of just cut into this card over here, right? So now you'll notice that there's just a slight bit of damage into this card over here. So what this gives the card is actually an edge marking. So if I no matter how many times I actually cut the deck or shuffle the deck, now because of this slight bit of damage, I can identify this card. I can identify this card and just cut straight to it, and then I have my selection under my control, like so, okay? So this can either be just a slight little mark, or you can even do a nail nick along the entire edge of one card. There is a particular method for that, but I'm not going to go over it. So I believe Roger Klaus actually used this particular method for nail nicking, okay? Which, again, I'm not going to go over, but again, it can be a small nail nick or one that's along the entire long edge or short edge of the card, okay? So that is nail nicking. Next, let's go over marked cards. Marked cards, you can probably already guess, is just a deck of cards where the identity of the cards is transcribed on the back design, whether through code or explicitly written. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? So if you want to like have a spectator select a card, you can already tell that this is a 3 of spades, right? So you can basically just track the card however you want, right? Or you can actually get an instant key card. So for example, if you want, if you ask the spectator to shuffle the deck however you want, right? I can actually get an instant key card. So if I look down the deck right now, I can tell that the top card is actually 6 of diamonds, right? And then if they give a cut or whatever, I can just look through the deck, find the 6 of diamonds, wherever it is. 6 of diamonds is over here, and that could just cut the deck back to its original spot. So then I have the 6 of diamonds back on top of the deck, okay? So you can actually use it to just identify a particular selection, or just to use it as a key card, to just get a key card, okay? So that is marked cards. Now let's get into the concept of short cards. So a short card is just where a card, there's just a tiny sliver of the card that is missing. This actually allows you to riffle up to the card with ease. So if I just riffle up, I can hit a short card very easily, allowing me to get a break or cut to it with ease. All right, so the most basic short card, so I actually just quickly trimmed short cards, so these aren't very good, but these exist, okay? So this is just a short card. This short card has a sliver missing from the bottom of the card, okay, on one of the short edges. So if I insert into the deck, on the short edge of the card, I can just riffle up on it, and then you'll hear a click, because that is where the card is missing, okay? So just a slight bit of the bottom of the card is missing over here. All right, so you can see it missing a sliver over here. So that is a short card. A narrow card is a card that's basically a short card, but instead of the narrow edge, instead of the short edge missing a sliver, is actually the long edge missing a sliver, okay? So I place it in the deck. Now you can actually see the missing sliver from the long edge of the deck. So I riffle up on it, I get the exact same click as I riffle, and that's how I know that I hit the narrow card, okay? So that is a narrow card. The other short card is actually a corner short card, where one of the corners, or more than one, it doesn't really matter. So the corner or the corners of the card is actually trimmed out. So if I have it in the center of the deck and I riffle from one of the corners, I get that same exact click. And that's how I know I hit my corner short card over here, okay? So that is a corner short. The last type of short card is a scallop short. So like a scallop, it's actually a U shape that is taken out from one of the edges of the cards. In this case, I took one out from the long edge, like so. Obviously, this is exaggerated for learning purposes. In reality, it's going to be a lot smaller, okay? So this can be from the long edge or from the short edge. So this essentially has the same benefits as a short or a narrow card, except that it's a lot more subtle because the corners won't be shortened, okay? So it's only the center that'll be shortened. So it'll have the exact same benefits. You can riffle up on it, and then you could go ahead and see this card over here. But if you riffle up from the corners, it won't happen, right? Because it's a U shape. So the corners are going to be intact. Wait, where is it? So the corners are going to be intact, but it's the center that you can riffle up on and get the same benefits as a short or a narrow card. So those are short cards. So we have a short card, which is the bottom. We have, which is the short edge. We have the narrow card, which is the long edge. We have the corner short, which is the corners. And then we have a scallop short, which is the center of the card that is missing a sliver. So those are the 4 types of short cards. So here are just a couple of other concepts regarding other ways to keep track of cards. So you have a wide card, which is the opposite of a short card. So it's slightly just fatter than the rest of the deck from its long edges. So it's just going to be boop, like so, okay? So that is a wide card. I don't have a wide card, mainly because I can't make my own. If it's any other gimmick, I can make my own, but I would have to like trim down the rest of the deck and keep one particularly wide, okay? So a wide card is just fatter from its long edges, okay? And then we have the long card, which is just a card that's a slightly bit longer than the rest of the deck. So it's basically a built-in in-jog, right? Remember how an in-jog is a card sticking out? So it's going to be exactly that, except it's flush from all sides with a slight bit of a sliver protruding. So that is a long card, okay? Next we have a thick card, which is a card that is actually thicker than the rest of the deck, making it heavier and actually easier to cut to, okay? So if you actually take a look at another card, so there's a normal card versus the thick card over here, it's actually just the slightest bit thicker, so you can either just glue 2 cards together, or you can do like me, where you actually just peel away the layers of the cards and just glue them together back to get a thicker card, okay? So this is just thicker by just a tiny fraction. It's also a double backer, which makes it not that great, but because it's a thick card, I can actually just cut to it, right? So you can cut to the thick card relatively easily, so that is a thick card. Next, let's go over the slick card. A slick card is just a card which has a slight bit of wax applied to it, which makes it extra slippery, allowing it to glide more. So here I have a normal deck of non-slick aviators. So that's just a normal deck of aviators. And here you have a slick aviator card. So this is the Ace of Spades. You can tell that there is a slight bit of waxiness on it because I applied wax on it. So if I want to cut to the Jack of Hearts, for example, if I actually just let the cards actually just flow, because this card is extra slippery, the cards above of the slick card will glide more. So then I have my Jack of Hearts right on top of it, okay? So this is how you actually use a slick card, okay? Everything above of this card will slide more easily, or everything below of it, okay? So that is a slick card. It's just a card that with wax applied on it, so then it is easier to just glide around, okay? And then we have a rough and smooth card, where a single card has rough and smooth on it. So if you're not familiar with like the invisible deck, the mental photography deck, right? There's a particular coating on a card that's called the rough and smooth, which you can get. There's like a whole bunch of rough and smooth sticks or sprays for this type of effect. But essentially, a rough and smooth card will have a particular sort of feel to it, which makes it sort of stick to other cards, right? So that is why it's called rough and smooth. But what this allows you to do is that by feeling, you can actually feel out the rough and smooth card. So if I actually lose it in the center of the deck, I can actually just feel out the particular card with the rough and smooth on it, allowing me to actually just control the card however I want. So it's basically just a haptic, a touch field, touch based key card, right? So then if I want, I could just go over the deck and then I could just, oh yeah, there's my key card over here, or that's not it, but you get the point, right? I could just go over the deck and then I could just feel out the faces without me looking at them, and then I could just determine where my key card is and where I need to cut the deck. All right, so that is a rough and smooth card, which I can do to just sort of just cut the deck and just do whatever I need. So that is a rough and smooth card. Next is going to be a sun bleached card. Now, if you don't know what sun bleaching is, it's actually a very common thing where if you actually leave something in the sun for too long, it'll actually start to sort of just pale a bit, right? So if you leave clothes out in the sun, it'll start to turn a bit paler. Same thing happens to cards, mainly because of the UV radiation and all that stuff. So that destroys like the inks and everything, right? So if you leave a card out on the windowsill or whatever, it'll actually turn a bit paler. So what this gives you is actually, I actually don't have it, but it actually gives you a key card, a reference, that's just a slight bit more pale. So just from visuals, you can tell, oh yeah, this card is paler, so then I can just cut to it. Okay, so that is another type of key card that you can get just by sun bleaching a card. So you can do it for like a day or so, and then you'll see that it is paler, and then you can actually just use it for key card purposes. So yeah, that is the that is the sun bleached card. Now let's get into the worn card. So that is a card from a used deck that you place into a newer one because the edges will be darker. So for example, if I place a worn card into this deck, you'll see this tiny sliver where there's this darker patch over here. So that is from an older deck, which means that now this acts as an edge marking. All right, so I now can tell from the edges that this is where I should cut to, and then I can have my worn card on the bottom of the deck, okay? So that's how you use a worn card. It is an edge marking that's basically you just take it from an older deck, you toss it in to a newer deck, and then you have a nice edge marking that you can use for key card purposes, like so, okay? So worn card. Next is just a pencil dot. So this is a small and light pencil dot that is placed on the card to actually just mark a particular card. So if you want, you could just have the card, the pencil dot card on the bottom or the top, and that'll act as a key card. So it's generally placed on the corners of the card. So over here, you can tell there's just a slight bit of a pencil dot over here. So then if I toss in the deck or I cut the deck or whatever, right? So the 8 of spades, for example, right? If I spread through the deck, all I need to do is spot the pencil dot, just cut to it, and then the 8 of spades is back on the bottom of the deck, all right? Or I can do it from a fan as well. So here, give the cards a fan. I can spot my pencil dot, and then the 8 of spades is over there, okay? So that is just a pencil dot marking, which is just a very rudimentary way to actually just mark a card. Okay, a pencil dot. Next, let's go over the scratch mark. So the scratch mark is just a small scratch on the back, on the card's back, where it just removes just the ink, all right? So then you could see, if you pay close attention, you could see where the scratch is, so then you could tell that this is a key card, all right? So that is just a scratch mark. I wouldn't be able to pick it up on camera, but there's actually just a slight bit of ink removed on this, and I can actually feel the scratch as well, all right? You can't see it, but there's a scratch over here that I can feel, and I can actually see where the ink isn't there, all right? So that is a scratch mark, which I can use as an optical key card, right? So if I spread through the deck, I can tell that my scratch mark is there. I can also use it as a touch-based key card, right? So if I deal through the cards, for example, so if I deal through the cards, right? The moment I feel the scratch mark, that's when I know that I hit my key card, okay? So over here, I can tell that this is my key card, and that is the 6 of spades, because I can tell that there is a scratch mark over here. So this can be on the corners. Usually it's on the corners, but it can be anywhere, okay? So that is a scratch mark. Next, we have a punch, which is just a small hole that is put into a playing card, and it basically allows the performer, to actually just feel out a specific card. So here, I exaggerated a bit, but you can actually tell that there is a hole in this card. So what this means is that if you place it on the 4 aces, if I deal through these cards, I'm actually feeling out for the hole near the corner of the cards, and I can feel, ah, yeah, that's an ace, but in this case it's a joker, right? So that is a punch mark, and usually it's very, very subtle. So this is a punch mark, and you shouldn't even be able to see this card, this hole, okay? So that is a punch. So this is mainly going to be a touch-based key card, but you can also use it visually if the hole is big enough. But generally, you shouldn't be able to see it, so that is a punch card, like so, okay? Another thing they can do is also just particles, so it's nothing very fancy. So usually we're performing at like a restaurant or whatever, there might be like some salt or some dirt lying around, right? You can actually just take like a grain of salt, place it like on the deck or whatever, give it a cut, and because, well, cards are really thin, right? So because the cards are really thin, just the slightest bit of a grain of sand or maybe dust or maybe like, not dust, but sand or salt or dirt is like thick, right? Compared to the deck, there will be a slight elevation separating in the deck, all right? There will be a slight separation in the deck, okay? So if you use salt or dirt or sand, right, you can actually just get that separation and you can lift up on it with enough practice, okay? So you just place the salt, the sand or the dirt on top, give it a cut, and then you can just lift up on it, okay? So generally that's used at restaurants where it's a lot more easy, like it's easier to access like salt on the go, right? Because usually there's like the salt shaker, you'll pour a bit of it on and then all that, right? So particles can be used to keep track of where the deck is cut as well. The next method is going to be using different finishes. So in the past, USPCC used to have like a whole bunch of different finishes on the cards, right? Usually you would have a card with a different finish in another deck. So for example, this is an air cushion finish, and this is a smooth finish. Okay, so if I place this card in the deck, also use the same back design. I'm just doing this just for explanation purposes. But if we actually have if we actually spread through the deck, you can actually feel the distinct finish of an air cushion finish, and then suddenly you will feel the smooth finish, and you'll be able to tell, oh, that's where I need to cut the deck, or that's where my key card is. So that is just using different finishes for key card purposes or whatever. Okay, so you can use key cards as you can use different finishes as briefs or whatever. Okay. So generally nowadays, it's a bit harder to find decks with the same back design with different finishes, but luckily Missing New York, which is a cardistry brand, lets you get both linen and smooth finish for their base series of decks with the same back design. So you can go ahead and pick up the linen and the smooth finish of those same decks, and then you'll be able to use finishes on the go, right? So yeah, that's just a very particular thing they can do, which you can't really do nowadays, but you can still sort of access it maybe, right? Just based on different finishes. So again, this is a touch-based key card type of deal, okay? The next type of thing is going to be called just a softened card. It's just a particular, so you know how when you bend a card too much, right? If you actually just bend the card too much, you would then get a crease, right? So this is actually called a softened card because this is soft now, like you can't recover this. But what this allows you to do is it basically just puts a bend into the cards, which you can then just cut to, okay? So this is a softened card over here. Usually it's put along of the corners, but you wouldn't do it with such like a big corner. You would actually do it with like a softer corner, like so, a smaller corner. So you actually do it like so, right? So you have a softer corner over here, which you can then cut to, okay, based on the bend, okay. So that is a softened card, but obviously this destroys your cards, so don't use it unless you're using like an old deck or a deck that you don't really care about. So that is a softened card. The last concept that I'm just going to present it, I'm not necessarily going to show it, is actually called Infinity. Infinity is a concept by Martin A. Nash. It's a pretty interesting concept. So Infinity is sort of a crossover between like a breather crimp and maybe like a coin impression type of deal, but it's actually neither of those. So it very much so accomplishes the same, well, that's the softened card, but Infinity very much so accomplishes the same things as a breather crimp, but unlike a breather crimp, you can actually use Infinity on the fly. Okay, so you can actually get Infinity on the fly, and that's what makes Infinity so good, is that you can actually just get an Infinity card on the fly, and then yeah, you basically have a breather crimp without needing to do the X and all that stuff. So that is Infinity by Martin A. Nash. It is in one of his DVDs called Infinity and Beyond, and it is a great concept, which I'm not going to go over here, but I just want to present Infinity because it is a great way of keeping track of a particular card or cards. Okay, so that is Infinity. Okay, so this is my Infinity card over here. All right, man, that was a lot of stuff. That was so many concepts, but I did think that it was pretty it's necessary to actually just detail all of these different concepts out, because, well, you never know when you actually want to actually do some research on these particular methods, and that's not everything, right? There's so many more methods out there that this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of methods. I already presented a whole bunch of them, but and quite a few ludicrous ones as well, right? Like the salt one, which does exist, right? The salt one and all that stuff, but I personally don't use them, but they are options that you can use and sort of research into. So please try and do some research into these different methods. Again, I didn't teach any of these explicitly, just for the sake of you going out and venturing and doing research into all of these methods. And yeah, because I wanted these methods to sort of just interest you, right? Just interests you enough that you can sort of like, oh, I want to do some research on them, right? So again, this is very much so an introduction. So yeah, if any of these methods actually caught your eye, I put the sources down in the comments down below, so you can go ahead and search that up. And yeah, you're gonna have a very, very long time researching all of these, because believe me, the magic rabbit hole is never ending. It's infinite, because again, like every day I learn something different about magic and different things. Like it's insane. Like there's so much research about magic that if you think you know everything, you're wrong. You're so wrong. So there's quite a lot of things that you can study, so please go look at the sources. And yeah, hope they had a good time sort of just looking at the different concepts that I presented throughout this video, and hope that you do some research into these as well, because you won't be able to find everything on YouTube. Let's be honest, I'm not going to present everything that I know on YouTube, because first off, I like to keep the good stuff to myself. The second thing is yeah, it's just not viable to put everything on YouTube. So yeah, get ebooks, right? There's so many magic ebooks being published nowadays. Get some magic books, right? There's even videos, right? VHS tapes out there. So there's a whole bunch of sources out there that you can go and look at. So yeah, I highly recommend that you do some research on your own based on the things that I have down in the comments below. And so yeah, happy hunting, happy researching, happy nerding around, because there's going to be a lot of it. Just based on this video, I think it's going to be like 40 minutes long. It's so long. But yeah, all right, well, that's going to be it for me today. Yeah, stay healthy, stay safe, happy hunting, happy research, and yeah, see you guys next time.